Okay, well, let's get started then. Thank you all for joining us. Glad to see you here on Friday with well, the sun was shining. I'm not sure that it still is anymore. It looks a little cloudy out there, but it's supposed to be a really nice day tomorrow as well. So 2 days in a row, lucky us. As Ben said, we've got about 40 people on. We expect maybe another 10 or 15, and hopefully they'll join us as they can. So I'm Valerie Rochon, President and Chief Collaborator of the Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth. Also on this chat forum are two of our staff, Ben Van Camp and Jen Stevens, and they're supporting this Zoom meeting. Ben is our moderator. So a little bit of housekeeping. You'll all be on mute. Ben will keep you all on mute. And please use the chat function to ask your questions. We've read about or we've learned about some Zoom meetings getting bombed or hacked, and if that happens to us, we'll simply close the meeting immediately. Ben's standing by on the close the meeting button, so let's hope that that doesn't happen. I want to touch on all the resources that we have. I'll turn, oh, look at that. There you go, right there, there it is, right on the whiteboard. portsmouthcollaborative.org/COVID-19. We're posting any information that we get, webinar opportunities for us, links through to resources for you. Follow us on our social, the Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have a Facebook group called the Seacoast Strong Business Forum. You can get a lot of information and share thoughts on that. And of course, there's the daily City of Portsmouth Daily City Managers Advisory put out by Stephanie Secord. Tons of information in that one. I think that there's going to be some information about Arbor Day actually and hugging trees, and I think you'll get a kick out of that today. Thank you to Ben and Jen for supporting us and being the wind beneath our wings for all of our communication that's going out there to you. I'm going to give you a quick update and then introduce our guest today. Last night we held our first virtual Business After Hours, which was hosted by Bangor Savings Bank and presented by our series sponsor, Bank of New Hampshire. We had a blast. We broke out into smaller rooms, if you will, and really had the chance to get to know some of our members and each other. All from the comfort of our homes. It was easy. It was really easy. Next month's Business After Hours is on May 28th, so put that in your calendars because I think you'll find that it's a really good time. So we're working closely with my colleague John Nyan, the head of the Hampshire Chamber, who's been appointed by the governor to the Business Task Force in charge of forming plans to reopen our businesses. Information about those meetings can be found at newhampshireeconomy.com, Reopening Task Force. This is a public meeting. These are public meetings. This is a public task force, and you can email questions to newhampshirereopen@newhampshireeconomy.com. You can listen to the meetings, get your pens ready, pens and pencils ready, by dialing in to 800-356-8278 and entering one of two pins, 194-499 or 600-744. The next meetings are scheduled for April 30th from 1 to 3 and May 1st from 9 to 11. We'll put this out on our social for you as well, so watch for that. We need input from our business community for this task force. This week we had a meeting with 19 of our restaurants to brainstorm how they would like to see us open up. What does that look like? For those restaurants that cannot cover their costs, either through takeout or sufficiently distanced al fresco dining spaces, which will be the first to reopen. These things must occur before restaurants can safely and profitably open. Sufficient testing for both the virus and for antibodies to know what percentage of the community immunity has developed. Flatten the curve. They only want to go through the rehiring, training, cleaning, and disinfecting once, not open and shut down again with new spikes and new lockdowns. Until staff and consumer confidence rises to the point where people feel safe, they will most likely stay closed. Next week, I'll be setting up meetings with other industry segments: lodging, retail, attractions and activities, arts, culture, and history, because we need your input. Couple more things. Ben, I can see you. Do we have anybody? I can see you as the spotlight. Not sure what that is about. That's okay.
You are the spotlight.
I am. Huh. I only see you. That's good because you've got the mountains behind you. That's working. As you know, just a couple of minutes ago, the $484 billion CARES Act Phase 4 funding was signed into law. The funds will be distributed to the PPL and EIDL grant and loan programs, hospital and healthcare workers, and COVID-19 testing. If you are eligible but have not yet applied for the PPP and EIDL loans, do it today. Call your local banker and start the process. There's already a deep backlog of applications that were not funded for the last round. So the sooner you get your application in, the better chance you will have to access those funds. And I'm hearing this from multiple sources, including our bankers. So please, 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 if you're eligible for those funds, make sure that you are applying as soon as possible. Call your local banker. The state has also received $1.25 billion from these federal funds, and the governor has created the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery, GOFER. He's also appointed 2 advisory committees, one of primarily legislators and a stakeholder advisory board of business leaders. The support needed from the $1.25 billion that is most important to support our businesses and for which we've been advocating at every level includes guaranteed supplies of rapid response testing for COVID and antibodies at no cost to our businesses, access to loans at low interest rates through established channels such as the RDCs, grants and loans to those who have no other lifelines available, including trade organizations and other 501c6s like the chambers, because we're all ineligible for the PPP, and allowing insurance companies to pay out on business interruption claims, which are excluded by the term virus at the moment, but backed up by the state and federal funds. And as we move towards phase-in recovery and developing marketing plans, we're working with the BEA and the New Hampshire Department of Travel and Tourism to protect the already approved budget for travel and tourism for marketing, which our hospitality industry will desperately need as we phase into recovery. Supporting the restructure of the JPP, the Joint Promotional Grant Program, to eliminate upfront payments and to maximize the effort by local organizations and DMOs, and develop messaging that tells our customers what we are doing, everything in our power to test, clean, and to provide safe distancing to keep our staff and customers safe. We'll also ask our customers to be responsible for their and our safety as well. So we are working with the NHLRA and other organizations to develop that promise, because it's consumer and staff confidence that's going to allow us to open up again. In light of the governor's announcement about schools closing for the rest of the year, I'm here today with Portsmouth School Superintendent Steve Zadravec, Assistant Superintendent George Shea, and Sean Clancy, who's the Associate Vice President of Great Bay Community College. Each of our guests will update you on what we've been doing behind the scenes, and then we'll open it up for questions. Please enter your questions through the chat function. Ben will be moderating and we'll share your questions, and we'll get as many answered as possible. So I'm going to start with Steve. Steve is the superintendent of Portsmouth Schools. This is his 5th year as superintendent, and he was the assistant superintendent for about 10 years before that. He has 2 daughters who have gone through the schools, and they're now at Portsmouth High School and live in Portsmouth with he and his wife, who's a teacher in Exeter. Total educational family. Steve.
Thanks, Valerie, and good afternoon, everybody. Those facts are pertinent right now because I'm living this remote education environment, watching my girls as students go through it, watching my wife as a teacher go through it, and living it as an administrator as well. And it's interesting, I think, to reflect. One of the common criticisms of K-12 schools in particular anyway is that they're slow to adapt. And I've always felt that criticism was kind of misguided, but certainly proof in the last 6 weeks that we have been able to adapt in many ways and really make some dramatic shifts in how we educate children, and have learned a lot in that process. I'll share a little bit of that with you. And it's, coming back to March 13th, that Friday, when, things were starting to sort of develop into a time when we didn't feel comfortable having students in schools anymore. And over that weekend, you know, transitioning to a remote learning environment. And it's really just amazing, and hats off to the full staff. It's nice to see some staff on the call here today. Just amazing work that people have done to shift or pivot into this remote learning environment, and every aspect of a school operation. So, you know, one of our first orders of business was to think about how would we feed students who rely on schools, particularly for free and reduced lunch families. And on the second day in this environment, we were able to have food available both for pickup as well as satellite distribution. So really just some amazing quick adaptations to help families and to help students. So as I mentioned, this is 6 weeks now that we've been in this environment. I guess I'd ask the staff to plug their ears for a second, but we got 6 more to go. We're at the halfway point, really, when we look at our full school year in this environment. We're, as Valerie says, the governor had announced recently that schools will remain in this environment for the rest of the school year, and you know, that just you know, brings up again the planning that we do to help adapt. I know George will speak a lot more specifically about some of the things that teachers are doing, students are doing, how we're working the technology. I think we've all become very accustomed to this format. We meet regularly as in Zoom. That seems to be all we do sometimes. But I will say, you know, it's also a way to stay connected. Our whole administrative team, K-12, meets every day. We start the day at 8 o'clock in a Zoom meeting. And from the first day of this, we've been wanting to collaborate, problem solve together, figure out some logistics, and also think about how we can really make sure that we're reaching all students. As you may know, the school board has had a goal about equity for a few years now, and as a district, we've tried to do a lot to create more access and more equity of opportunity for students. And George will touch on this, but one of the things obviously being thrust into this environment is the risk of exacerbating some inequities in our community that exist. So food is one example of how we've tried to help bridge that gap, but technology is another. And so looking at how we can get technology access to students, we've handed out Chromebooks, we've handed out hotspots for families who may not have internet connection. There's been a lot of prop-up infrastructure that George has been instrumental in doing, and he'll share probably a little bit more on that. But I guess, you know, in all of this, I keep reflecting on the amount of work that teachers and all educators are doing, what seems to be behind the scenes now. They are doing these same kinds of lessons with classes. There's a lot of interface going on, a lot of connection between teachers and students still, but it is a very, very different way of operating. And hats off to the educators who have put in hours and hours upon hours of work to really adapt what they do into this new environment and still keep strong connections with students. So I know that you know, we've been putting all effort into this for the last 6 weeks, and I think we've tried to establish a system going forward. When we first went into it, that first week, we didn't know how long it was going to be, and so people were putting all oars in the water, assuming that they may be sprinting in this race. And I've heard the Commissioner of Education refer to it as shifting from a sprint to a marathon. I think that's true, because now we've really looked at how do we really adapt in this environment for a longer period of time. And one of the things that we wanted to do was try to find a schedule that seemed to fit with the work we needed to do. And so after a couple of weeks, we adapted to having 4 days of instruction, online instruction available, and then Wednesdays being what we termed Wellness Wednesdays, and just trying to get out some other enrichment activities or other opportunities for students to explore other things, but not be deep into the academics necessarily on Wednesdays. And even more importantly, give our teachers some time in collaboration with each other, because that's a critical piece of this work right now, is how do we build on consistency between classrooms, tap on each other's creativity to how we're engaging in this. There's just some really, really amazing exemplars out there of creativity right now in all ways, both from teachers' lessons with students, as well as schools keeping connected with families, a lot of communication, because we know families, this is just as big an adjustment for them. And the real burden on families, they didn't sign up to be classroom aides or teachers or whatever, and yet they're in a position now to help monitor learning in their home. I think there's been a few parents that have reached out to try to expel their students. I've been resistant to do that. There's nowhere else for them to go right now. But overall, I mean, it's really a lot of effort on everybody's part, and it's affected each family differently. Some families have been able to adapt pretty seamlessly, and others, this has been a real burden. And as a school department, we want to try to assist in whatever way we can. And so we put out some surveys to families to try to get their input and know where their pressure points are and try to respond to them. Now, of course, we're turning towards all of our end of year activities and discussion. And, you know, as I said, this has affected us at all areas of the organization. And as you all know, one of the great things about spring and the end of school is a lot of celebrations, a lot of activities, culminating with high school graduation, and all of those things are being adapted right now. So what can we do virtually? How do we make it special and personalized? There's, again, a lot of creative ideas being developed. And yet we also want to, you know, honor what the students want. I know this past week at the high school, there's been a lot of conversation about graduation and with students and what do students want to see in this. And, you know, we're still going through some of those ideas and what might be possible there. But it really has been a shift and has turned a lot of things on its head for sure. And all of that, you know, even from a budget perspective, we've looked at how does this, you know, what are the things we haven't had to expend in this last quarter? What are the additional expenses we've had to incur? And what might we need to plan for? For example, we would love to be able to extend more support this summer, even than we typically do, because we know some students are really going to need, whether we're in this remote environment or transitioning back into some kind of physical environment, they're going to need a lot of support coming back. And so that just brings me to my last point, which is that our conversation also now is about a plan for reentry. I know the governor is going to put out some guidance on that as well. And that's something that as we look into next fall, we're starting to develop contingency plans too. As students come back, what level of comfort, what are the level of resource that we need with teachers? I noticed internationally, Denmark, you know, reopened some schools. And if you saw that, you know, they're practicing a lot of how do you build in more social distancing even within the school environment. When we get to next fall, it's hard to know exactly where we'll be, but we certainly know we may need to plan for some of those same kinds of contingencies. So I guess I would leave it there and turn it over to George for some other specifics, if you'd like, Valerie.
Great. Thank you very much, Steve. That's what a challenge. What a challenge this is for you, for the parents, for the students, for everybody. It's a whole new world out there. Some of it really good, I think, and some of it maybe a little bit less so, going back to that expelling students thing. Thank you, Steve. And we'll continue on with George, but I just want to acknowledge that we do have two of our city councilors joining us today, Cliff Lazenby and Petra Huda. Thank you for joining us. I also want to give a quick shout out to Courtney Richings, who's the CTE Career Technical Education Director at the Portsmouth High School, with whom Ben has been working hand in glove to develop school to work programs before all of this happened. And that program was rocking and rolling. And Courtney, we've really enjoyed working with you, and we look forward to the time when we can work with you again. So now I'd like to introduce George Shea, who's the Assistant Superintendent of Portsmouth Schools. He's the former principal of New Franklin Elementary School. And before he turned to the administrative dark side, he was a digital learning specialist at the Little Harbor School and middle school teacher. George holds a master's in education from Antioch, New England, a bachelor's degree in economics from Skidmore, and a certificate of participation from the School of Hard Knocks that comes with 20+ years in the public school system. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Valerie. It's really poor form that my bio is longer than Steve's. I'm sure I'll be getting it for that later, from him later about that. But yeah, Steve touched on a lot, and what I've been thinking about and what he said is the sheer amount of pivoting that's had to go on. You know, there was the initial pivot in the remote learning, but as we've been in this, I think there are these developmental phases that happen, and where we change. You know, there was the initial pivot where there was a rush and a lot of you know, and there remains to be sort of huge camaraderie around this and a we got this kind of thing, and lots of videos being shown back and forth from the students to the teachers to the students. There still are, and a lot of motivation. And I was worried that when the governor announced that we were going for the rest of the year, I think while everybody knew that was probably going to happen, I think the reality of that was hard for people because, let's face it, I mean, people don't get into education to make lesson plans. You know, the teachers feed off students and the students feed off teachers. There's a dynamic that feeds both of them there and all the staff. So I think staff really had to dig deep in the recent weeks and say, like, all right, I need to build the energy for this next sort of run in the marathon, this next leg. And they've really done that in spades. It's been incredible what they've sort of put out just recently to sort of make sure there isn't a lag and a lull in the energy. Because it's hard for the teachers and staff that are doing this. You know, we have to remember it's hard for families that are suddenly getting a job that they didn't ask for. But a lot of our teachers have little ones that are scampering around at their feet that don't understand. Mommy needs to teach about, you know, quotients right now. You know, it just doesn't make sense to them. So they're managing their lives, and we've been trying to think about them a lot in how we balance this. Because again, it's a lot coming from a lot of different angles with daycares closed. I think Steve put it well when he said that the admin has been very good about prioritizing right off the bat. I think that food piece came up immediately. We do stare at each other every single morning at 8 a.m., which is always fun. I think an initial thing was the food and then the technology and that equity piece that we wanted to work on right off the bat. We were fortunate in that we sort of had some foresight about this in that we ordered a lot of remote hotspots, wireless hotspots for students because we knew that wireless access might be a problem. We're not a one-to-one school district. We're close at our high school and it's been a phased-in approach, but we did offer Chromebooks to all students who needed them. In grades 3 through 5. With grades K through 2, we focused on more of a packet type curriculum. There's some Zoom learning that goes on, but it's a lot more hard copy, mainly because I think our principals wisely worried about the developmental appropriateness of running those kindergarten and first grade curricula online. And but we were able to give all students that wanted one a Chromebook that didn't have something at home. So we've delivered those through different mechanisms. Our IT department still is sort of transacting with them as some of them break and things go wrong. We have a support center that manages those at Portsmouth High School. We've delivered now 22 of the wireless hotspots that'll help kids get that connectivity. And at first it was students that just didn't have any connectivity. Now we're finding it might be a family with 4 or 5 humans trying to get in through one router and feeling the stresses of that and students not being able to get work done. So we're sort of expanding their capacity just so that doesn't become an obstacle to them. I think a big piece has been with teachers streamlining what they do and how we assess and doing more assessment by observing learning versus having this accumulation of materials to demonstrate learning just because it's not as viable in this moment right now. While all these assignments may accrue to show a certain level of learning for students, I think teachers have gotten to a point where we're almost in a competency-based model right now, where we're sort of streamlining down to our pure competencies of what do we want kids to know and be able to do, and how are the different ways that we can assess that and evaluate that in this environment in a way that's not punitive, in a way that allows kids to show multiple ways of demonstrating their learning, simply because that's where we are right now. You know, they're not going to be showing the poster board projects and things. So in that sense, it's also allowed us a more creative venue, I think, and given people license to look at alternative performance assessments and ways that we can, again, observe learning in different ways. So that's been a really nice touch that we've been able to access. In my role, I'm also focused on professional development, and we're fortunate to have great point people in each building, a lot of our librarians and computer integrators who, you know, you talk about pivoting, got people up to speed very quickly on some of these tools that we're using. We were fortunate that we already had a previously scheduled professional development day on March 27th that we were able to delve into about 12 different trainings that we offered that day. So to get people who were on the periphery maybe with their technical ability into more of the mainstream in terms of using Google Classroom, using Zoom, using Screencastify, and all the different tools that we use to do this remote learning piece. And it's a nice blend. We have teachers that run regular synchronous classes where they may be doing their full class in a live Zoom session. And then we also have teachers that do some combination of that with more of a flipped learning environment with a pre-taped lesson, or the instruction comes beforehand that the students may be able to view at their own time, and then they can come in for live support with the teacher. So we've been trying to find what's the best blend of that at each level, and different teams and different classes and grade levels are starting to really figure that out, and I think find their groove. At least from the feedback I get, they are finding it. So I think that's all I had. Anything else?
Well, we're definitely, I know that the question's already racking up, so.
All right, we'll get it in Q&A.
We'll get to them in Q&A. So thank you very much, George. I appreciate that. As I said, it's just a whole new world. And listening to you talk, I'm not in the education industry, and so I would never consider some of the things that you're talking about that you've had to deal with. So it's stunning how you've pivoted, honestly. I want to introduce Sean Clancy. He's the Associate Vice President for Marketing and Business Engagement at Great Bay Community College. He has served in various capacities since 2016 after a 30-year career in business. His background includes positions in sales, marketing, and operations, as well as in organizational and leadership development. Sean has also taught at the post-secondary level. And I will say that Sean recently facilitated a retreat for us here at the Chamber, and he was brilliant. So if you need a facilitator who understands business and organizational and leadership development, little plug, shameless plug for Sean Clancy. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Valerie. Gosh, I appreciate that. So I first want to acknowledge I'm speaking for a lot of people here at Great Bay Community College who have, very similar to our K through 12 colleagues, pulled together, and I'm really struck by the parallels of the pivoting and its faculty and its administration and all the different roles, and then it's our students and our support staff, and we had a pretty amazing effort to move to 100% online. But before I get to that, I just want to say, I want to kind of highlight the connection with our K through 12 colleagues, and we have a very robust Running Start, early college programs here at Great Bay and really across the state of New Hampshire, which allows students to accelerate their post-development, their post-secondary education. And there's a third one, a new one coming on board, which will be the New Hampshire Career Academy. Career Academy is again across the states, and we already have students enrolled for that. So those are 3 programs where high school students can access post-secondary courses, college level courses. And we just think that's going to be more valuable maybe in this new world going forward. It's been something that's been growing across the state. But I did want to say we had a major effort to go. I'll talk about a quick update on where we are at as Great Bay. And we are 100% remote and online classes, and we started that on March 23rd. And that was a very quick response, similar to what Steve was talking about. And our faculty and our students and our administrators and our service professionals really all literally got off campus. So the brunt of that fell to our IT department, our very small IT department, to get everybody out and set up and trained and functioning. And it worked a lot smoother than we all thought it was going to. But to say we are 100% teaching online or remotely, live classes using Zoom as everyone else is, and all of our services too. So there's a lot of services behind the scenes that people don't see, whether it's advising, admissions, financial aid, transfer, academic coaching, even things like student life and our graduation committee. So all of these things are happening with 100% operational and 100% operationally, and our students are being serviced, and that really is the key. My language is we need to keep these promises that we made at the beginning of the semester or when they came to us, and at least see them through this term before we start to deal with what's coming up next. So looking forward, we are planning on being back in classes live for the fall. We've already announced this summer that everything is either online or Zoom. So that's how we're going to operate this summer. But in the fall, we're planning to be on campus. We certainly have our online classes, which are worked through Canvas, which we've always had. And that's where you have assignments and discussions and group work like you heard about from Steve and George. But also the remote classes by Zoom. I just want to make sure that we're really clear on this, because we've seen a lot of pluses and a lot of opportunity here. These are virtual classrooms that replicate what happens here on campus. They're real time, they're live, they are scheduled just like you would be if you were taking English Comp 101 on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. That's when you meet on Zoom, and you're getting to know your instructor, you're working with your classmates. So that's just an important distinction we want to focus on and make sure folks know that we're using that tool. Another one is flex learning. So that's kind of a new term, but you may have heard the term hybrid, and that's just really combining online classes with live Zoom real-time instruction. And in the fall, we are expecting to be able to offer lab classes. I mean, we are known here for our technical programs, whether they be health-related or science-related or technology or even things like welding. We're going to follow those CDC physical distance guidelines, but we are fully expecting to be able to offer these courses that we're, quite honestly, we're known for and we know are needed in our communities. I would like to share a few notes about our faculty, and this might be something that people don't know, and if you don't know Great Bay, you should check us out again for the very first time. But our faculty literally turned on a dime. We have, and there was an article in the paper about a week or so ago, but we have faculty teaching from their garage, from their back room, yards, their kitchen table, whatever it is, but recreating that learning experience in some pretty technical programs, as well as all of our other programs. So we're pretty impressed by that transition as well, similar to Steve and George. But I want to share with this group that we have over 30 full-time faculty, and I went through the website today. 75% of our faculty have advanced degrees, and a full third, if not a little bit more, have PhDs. So we have always known we provide quality education, and we want to make sure that in these times of concern and questions and a lot of things not being known, that we are here for you, and we feel like we can deliver what is needed and what's expected from your community college. So at the end of the day, we continue to provide high quality, local, affordable education. We're a great place to start or continue or complete your post-secondary education. And we will continue to be part of this community. We have a whole nother, I could speak for another 20 minutes on workforce development and training and some of those things that we do. Maybe there'll be a separate meeting on that I'd love to come back and talk about. But that's another part of our mission, is to help support our communities and our businesses and our economy. And I'll just end with a note from the community college system that it's kind of the message we're putting out, because again, we are one of 7 community colleges across the state. We operate in all corners of New Hampshire. And I'll just read this to you so that we're clear that this is how we look at our role. The community colleges are well positioned to help New Hampshire residents quickly get back into the economy. And we all know, based on the headlines, that that's going to be critical. We do this with certificate and degree programs that align with workforce needs. And for students graduating from high school this spring who face an uncertain college landscape, many will consider community college as safe places to enroll, an affordable way to start college, and a step that preserves all kinds of options for career pathways and transfers to traditional four-year universities. We are strong at that at Great Bay. A lot of our sister schools are as well. And as much as that's been our value proposition since we've been around, we feel like those are coming more to the forefront, and we want to make sure we can deliver for any and all students or citizens who need our services. So thanks, Val.
That's great. You know, I'm pretty impressed by the number of PhDs. I guess I didn't realize that either. So thank you. That was a good statistic. So we're going to turn this over to Ben as our moderator and ask him to share the questions for Superintendent Zadrovic and Assistant Superintendent Shea and for AVP Clancy, if you will, please. Ben, thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure. And since I get to ask the questions, I get to ask mine first. So that's the rules of the game. So my question, and I'm glad Courtney is on the call today, Courtney Richings. I'm curious about the CTE classes. I imagine teaching welding or cooking or automotive repair or any of those sort of hands-on programs is incredibly difficult in this environment. And I'd love to learn some more about how that's being done and how that's going.
You had to ask that one, Ben, huh? Go ahead, Steve.
So I'll just start, and anyone could jump in. But yeah, these the CTE programs are a great example, among others, that it's difficult when you lose that direct hands-on component. And I would just say again, I hats off to the CTE instructors and to Courtney, doing a lot of creative things and really helping with students. She'd be able to give you a whole lot more examples, but I know it came up this week when we were asked if we had any freezer and refrigerator space that Gather could use in the community to store some of the food that they were getting in donations. And we looked at our refrigerators and asked Courtney if we could get a little space in there, and that was great. She was very welcoming, accommodating, but wanted to be clear that Chef is still using that space. She's coming in. She's putting food in there so she can get it out to students, so students can get sort of kits and packets of food to do their lessons with at home. There's just a lot of that kind of outreach going on to help really satellite some of the hands-on component that we can, and just a lot of effort going on there. We're working right now on how some of the end of program certificate kind of activities can still happen at some point. And I know that she's working through some of the ideas and details for that right now. But just a lot of, again, highlight the business partners, highlight the help that we've had, help from the chamber, and really helping build out those programs in the community. I mean, it's really starting to become really impressive.
Courtney's sent a couple of messages via chat. I'm going to unmute her because I think she'll hurt me or something if I don't. So she intimidates me. So we're going to unmute. No, I'll put Courtney on the spot for a second.
Hi, Ben. Hi, everybody. I was going to hold up my sign. Help, I'm muted. So, no, but Steve's got it down. I mean, honestly, I could not be more proud of the team in CTE and the Herculean efforts that they're putting forth to make this work for kids. Across the board, we've been being as creative as possible. So from the preschool on down, we're utilizing every safe form of communication to keep the preschool students engaged. We've got some great online tools that we're using. So there's a company that provides diagnostic real world applications in automotive technology. So the students are still being able to, it's almost like doing a virtual dissection in a A&P lab, but they're doing that with dissecting and problem solving automotive dilemmas. So that's fantastic. For families that are comfortable still having their children work in automotive dealers, there are students that are working, you know, at Porsche, it's just them in the vehicle. They're there in the dealership during the day, continuing the hands-on skills. You know, some classes are more difficult than others. And as Steve alluded to, we're working on figuring out how to continue on with certifications in welding. So they're focusing on a lot of theory and reinforcement there. But it's really amazing what folks have done. And our IT team has been fantastic in supporting the kids. So they reimaged some machines that are local in the building to be able to allow the architecture kids to be able to continue working with software that typically our Chromebooks wouldn't be able to handle, but they're remoting into the school facility high-powered machines through their Chromebooks to still keep building and developing their architecture portfolios. So I think persistence and grit and creativity is key here, and everybody is really pulling together.
Very cool. I knew if anyone could figure this out, Courtney, you were the person to do that. So thanks for jumping in there on the fly. So another question, and maybe Steve or George would be best. I'll let you guys jump in and answer this. Is, do you see any of these changes, any of these new models, any of this sticking around? You know, our snow day is no longer going to be a thing because we don't need to be in school anymore. You know, like, you know, what's the future? What's going to stick around from this? What do you think?
I think you can't help but have an imprint from what's happened here and what's going on here. Just in terms of the learning that teachers and students have had about new ways to do this education thing. Not necessarily saying it's the ideal way, but it certainly has a piece, right? And I think that's going to have, it's going to resonate even when we're back in brick and mortar school. Steve can talk to the snow day thing, but I think we certainly do have, obviously, tools in our toolkit now to get around that if we wanted to.
Yeah, I bring it up because George and I joke about this often. Some districts do what they call blizzard bags already, and use some kind of remote learning or what they did at the time to cover for a snow day. And we've always kind of felt those always fell short to the quality we would want in any kind of remote environment. So even though some of our staff and students have asked for it, we've been reluctant. And these last 6 weeks, I think I could speak for both of us, have shifted our mindset a little bit to, you know, what we could actually put together to create virtual school days and those snow days. So, you know, who knows, that may become more part of our practice going forward.
Well, since you mentioned sort of the quality piece, one of the questions that came across was on how do you think the students will be prepared for next year? And is there going to be any testing or any metrics done to make sure that, you know, they really achieved all the competencies that they should have received this school year and that they're ready for whatever that next step is, whether it's the next grade or graduation in college or career. So how are you going to handle that?
Just quickly, and George can add on to it, that certainly is part of our thinking, Ben, is how do we need to re-enter students, both from how do we get some assessment of where they are, how do we build additional interventions? I mean, the good news is we've been in practice for a while to help fill gaps for students and build out interventions, and how do we expand those to identify what students may be lacking coming back. You know, we have a lot of those things in place to a degree, but we are looking at some other assessment tools that can be helpful to us in that. And as George alluded to, even in this environment, one of the things that teachers have had to think more and more about is how am I going to distill down to what is absolutely essential in this class? What could I shed away without harming kids, and what's really essential? And that's a healthy mindset to have. And I think if we can target our interventions to where kids may have gaps with what we've deemed essential, I think kids will catch up quickly if they're behind.
Yeah, Steve said there's a certain purity of learning and assessing learning that's going on now, where it's what is the observation versus what are these items that compile to create some kind of average that's supposed to be a number that describes learning. We're really looking at identify the thing we want kids to know and be able to do, and then are they proficient in it or not? And there's a certain purity to that that's interesting. But I would also add to Steve, even this year, regardless of next year, we're trying to get creative about what does our summer look like with how do we deploy our resources to support kids to ensure that they've had the necessary learning this year. So right now we're in that mode of trying to figure, okay, how can we allocate staff and get engaged staff to help kids sort of secure that learning that may have been lost if it was during this period. So that's where we are now. It's a little tough to finalize it because we're not sure what mode that might take, whether it's going to be a physical or remote effort. But that's what we spend a lot of our time thinking about, is not just next year, but what does the end of this year look like in terms of those remediations.
Hey, Ben, if I could just circle back to the, what's going to remain. And I think there is going to be some transformation. We're seeing it certainly at our level as an extension of K through 12. But this streamlining and competency-based and really focused on what is it students need to learn and leave with, especially when you're talking about shorter degrees here at the community college or moving directly to career. I think, you deal with a lot of employers. They want folks who can come in and do the job, learn the job, progress to a career. And these are the things we're going to need to focus on, because we're not always going to have the time and resources that maybe we've had in the past. So I think that urgency, that focus that you heard about from Steve and George, we're seeing that as well at Great Bay.
Great, thanks, Sean. And a couple questions for you since you jumped in here. Some folks have sent a few over specifically to Great Bay. One from City Councilor Lazenby for Lazenby has a question about a lot of companies have ramped up their operation due to products they make that are needed in the pandemic response. And has Great Bay done anything, or are they prepared to do anything to help get staff trained quickly to, maybe work at Vapotherm to build those respirators, those ventilators that are desperately needed, or any of the other companies around?
Yeah, we certainly are. And I'll just say that's really been a strength of Great Bay. So the two fields that we participate mostly in outside of the college degrees and certificates are advanced manufacturing and allied health. We have very strong programs and lots of demand to move folks from either unemployment or underemployment in the past into healthcare careers. We've got them, we're waiting in the wings to restart those programs. We know the demand is going to be there. We partner with all the major healthcare organizations, but also certainly in advanced manufacturing, that is a strength of ours. And we have relationships working with organizations. And now you probably have heard about over the last year or so, maybe year and a half, the apprenticeship model that is supported by the community college system, the grant that we received from the Federal Department of Labor. That is out there, that is available, and that is exactly to help organizations ramp up, move in different directions, and do those kind of things. So we are chomping at the bit. We are in communication with manufacturers and businesses that want to safely get back to work and do what they can. And as soon as they are in their buildings, we can be in there beside them.
Great. Another question. There's a lot of schools and rumors going around that a lot of colleges may make freshman year free for students, or reduce the costs because of the environment being different and things like that. Are there any of those rumors circulating around Great Bay, and how's Great Bay going to position itself?
Well, I would say as part of a system, that would be a system level decision, but we haven't really heard about that. I mean, I think funding and obviously is going to be an issue. This is an issue for the state. We receive some of our funding from the state, primarily receive our funding from enrollment. So as you can imagine, we've got pressure coming from a lot of different areas to be able to remain operational and sustainable. So I would just, the answer to the question is, I haven't heard that rumor at the Community College System of New Hampshire. Leave it at that.
Fair enough. Probably jumping back to either George or Steve, some questions came across about sort of the social side of education, right? And it's not just what you learn, it's how you learn to work with people. So how are people continuing to work in groups and develop those group management skills? And how have you been able to address any like social isolation that some students may have experienced throughout this process?
Yeah, so I'll start, Ben. That certainly is something that this environment has brought to light, which is, for better or for worse, we're not physically together. And so we know that that's, again, back to my earlier point, that affects families differently, but it also takes away something of physical contact and group work with students. Some of that is still happening. I mean, in terms of this online environment, students are still working together, but we are, to your point, physically isolated, and that itself has an effect. So our counselors have really put a lot of work into how do you help reach out to families, out to students, make sure that we can still work with them on a lot of social skills if necessary or other things. So there's a lot of outreach going on specific to that because we know it's a pressure point, and yet that is the inevitable piece in terms of the physical isolation here.
I think Steve pretty much covered it there. I mean, it's a concern because of, I mean, I have a college kid at home and it's a concern for him, but we're trying to find as many media as possible. I think one thing Zoom has is that meeting room feature. So we do have students in breakout rooms still working in small groups that we're able to do that. But our guidance department and our wellness coordinator, I think that's a big piece of what they're doing during this period is trying to make sure that students are connected. That was another big driver between us doing the Wednesday, the midweek day versus a long weekend for our Wellness Wednesdays. I think staff and admin were really worried about not having contact with kids for 3 days. And they thought that the breakup in the middle of the week was a better way to keep kids online. That was the main driver for the selection of that day.
Very good. Some question came across about with the new environment, do you think you're going to have a harder time hiring new teachers in the future? You know, this may not be what they signed up for. So do you envision having a harder time hiring teachers in the fall?
Well, I guess I'd put 2 points out there to start. One is I don't know if it would affect those who are interested in getting into teaching so much. I do think that, in terms of Portsmouth, we stand in a pretty good position in terms of recruitment generally. But the interesting thing in this environment too is that, not to put it on age necessarily, but a lot of our newer teachers are the ones who've been able to adapt the quickest in this environment and really create some innovative ideas that I don't know if we would have gotten out of them as quickly as we have in the last 6 weeks. So, maybe that is on the other side of the coin, something that speaks to a different skill set in some of the prospective teachers.
Very good. I think the last question, you've already touched upon it, but maybe you could just highlight it again. Someone wants to know more about what the plans are for the seniors. And I think that's a work in progress right now, but as you alluded to, but what do you think the likelihood of a delayed graduation versus virtual or something along those lines?
Yeah, just briefly, it's undecided right now, but where we are this week is tapping into some feedback from students. The general tenor of the feedback is students really want some kind of physical event, even if it means waiting. I know from schools around us, a lot of them are pushing off into a date sometime in the future to actually have a more physical event. Some are exploring other virtual opportunities. Maybe we'll do a combination of the two, but the overwhelming feedback was to want to get together physically from the seniors that we've heard from. And so we're trying to honor that, but at a time when we have no certainty as to when that will be. So I guess that's really the dilemma we're in right now. In the meantime, we want to find some closure to this year that honors where seniors are. And so the high school right now is working on some of the options around that.
Yeah, and Ben, I'll just say, similar here at Great Bay. I mean, we graduation is really, really important to a lot of our students. We have a lot of first generation college students that come through here, and it's a pretty big deal, to the point where we've had to have 2 graduation ceremonies per year to be able to fit everybody in one place, and we didn't want to turn anybody away. So we're going down that virtual path and thinking about something that may look more like an inaugural homecoming event in the fall, which we'd certainly want to get graduates back for, as well as other alums.
Very good. Thank you, Sean, for chiming in there. Last thing I'll just kind of mention before I turn it back over to Valerie. We've had a number of people put praise in the chat to both Great Bay and both Steve and George and the team at the education system in Portsmouth. And not everyone can see that, but I think it's worth noting that a number of parents of students are on the call today and have been very appreciative and sent in a lot of great comments about just how smoothly it's gone and just how much they appreciate the efforts from everyone in the school system. So I just wanted to share that with everyone before I turn it back over to Valerie.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. And well-deserved praise, it sounds like. So thank you. And Steve and George and Sean, how lucky were we to have you guys today? Because I know it's busy doing all of these, getting all of these pivoted programs online and keeping them. It's like getting all those plates in the air and keeping them spinning. So we appreciate all the good work that you're doing and the time that you spent with us today. Thank you so much. I want to remind everybody that we need to hear from you. What are your concerns? What are your needs now? What are your needs going to be as we start to recover? I know that's really hard to answer because none of us have the crystal ball, but we need to hear from you as we work through all of these phases of recovery. I want to remind you that all Chamber Chat live events are recorded and will be posted to our Facebook and social and YouTube channels, so you can revisit these. And I want to tell you that next week, we have either Congressman Pappas or someone from his staff. We're still waiting for confirmation on that. We do have confirmation from someone from Senator Shaheen's staff to join us to unpack this next level of funding and what's in it that we don't know about, because we find we've learned a lot about the first round. You know, we focus on sort of the high numbers, but there are some low numbers in there as well that are in these funding packages, and so they're going to unpack that for us next week. We're waiting for confirmation on exactly who will be joining us, but we will put that up on our event calendar, and you'll know that pretty soon. I want to remind people to be kind, be helpful, wash your hands, take this time to reevaluate what's important in your lives. And you know, someone told me many, many years ago, we all need 11 hugs a day to thrive, not just to survive, but to thrive. And that doesn't mean physical hugs. It means saying kind words. Like what Ben just said to George and Steve and Sean, those were hugs, right? That counts as part of the 11. So I'm challenging everybody to go out there and be a hugger, be part of that 11 hugs a day. I want to thank you all. We are in this for the long haul, and we will be with you as you navigate through. Now we're in for a treat. Friend of mine, her daughter is Leanna Hunt. Leanna is not working very much right now because all the shows in Broadway are closed, and she is a Broadway star. She has starred in productions such as Newsies and Mamma Mia on Broadway. She's also been on national tours in Bright Star, Wicked, and Mamma Mia. So here, for one of your bright spots, and hopefully one of your hugs and smiles of the day, is Leanna Hunt.
Hey everyone, I am Leanna Hunt.
I'm Larkin Bogan.
This is a song from one of the shows that I did at Lyric that just felt like something we could all use right now. The sun'll come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there'll be sun. Just thinking about tomorrow clears away the cobwebs and the sorrow till there's none. When I'm stuck with a day that's gray and lonely, I just stick up my chin and grin and say, oh, the sun'll come out tomorrow, so you gotta hang on till tomorrow. Come what may, tomorrow, tomorrow, I love you tomorrow. You're always a day away. Tomorrow, tomorrow, I love you tomorrow. You're always a day
Woo! Thanks, Leanna. Bye, all. Have a great weekend. See you next week.